Picture this. You're sitting in your office. Someone walks in, smiling, handing you a cup of coffee. They speak kindly, laugh with ease, and yet deep in their eyes, something feels off. It's not coldness, but a void, a calculation. Then it hits you. Not everyone who's polite is a friend. The truth is, some don't just dislike you. They wish you erased from existence, not by blade or poison, but through quiet sabotage. And Stoicism teaches this. If we are to live in peace, we must be strong enough to confront the warning signs, even when they come from those who once made us feel safe. This isn't a message of fear. It's a call to wake up. And if you've ever felt that something isn't quite right about someone, don't ignore these 5 signs. 1. The silent watcher, the invisible one. We've all experienced those odd moments in life when someone starts showing up too often, in places we never expected. At first, it feels trivial. A colleague happens to be in line at your usual morning coffee spot. An old acquaintance appears at an exhibit you only mentioned in a private group. A stranger at the gym, 3 times a week, always at the same hour. You wonder, am I overthinking this? And you dismiss the feeling, chalking it up to coincidence. But Stoic philosophy teaches us otherwise. If something disturbs your peace of mind, it deserves scrutiny, not dismissal. In a world where every act has a motive, repeated appearances are rarely random, especially when they come from someone distant, with no clear reason to keep intersecting with your path. What matters isn't just their presence, but the manner of it. Right place, right time. Sometimes even before you arrive. They don't talk much, don't show warmth, but they look. Their gaze catches yours for just a moment, long enough for you to know they saw you. Then they turn away, leaving you in a haze of doubt. What did I just see? Why are they here? Once you can ignore, but by the 3rd or 4th time, your mental stillness begins to erode. Such behavior often stems from a hidden drive, deliberate surveillance. This isn't the accidental glance of modern life, shaped by shared routines or digital algorithms. It's a repeated, structured presence, crafted to be subtle enough not to trigger alarm. They want you to question your own intuition. Because once you start doubting your feelings, you become passive, compliant, and easier to control. The silent observer rarely forms a clear personal link. No friendship, no small talk, no traceable role in your life. And that's the danger. They remain undefined in your mind. You have no profile to assess, no category to place them in, no inner warning label. They live outside your mental radar, yet remain within your line of sight. In some cases, this behavior extends further into digital surveillance, tracking your online activity, knowing where you check in, who you interact with, what you share. If you're active on social media, remember, not all your followers are supporters. Some are studying you, your tastes, your words, your patterns, to map your behavior and predict your next move. But their motive isn't curiosity, it's control. Often, this is the first step in a toxic sequence that leads to sabotage, isolation, or even direct harm. Emotional, reputational, or physical. Strategic presence is used to build false familiarity, lowering your guard. When you see them often enough, you start thinking, oh, they just come here too. And once that feels normal, you stop questioning it. That's when they have succeeded. earning proximity without suspicion. Stoicism doesn't ask us to become paranoid. It demands awareness. To live with clarity is to notice strange patterns in your environment, not from fear, but from readiness. When someone unrelated keeps showing up in your orbit, when a stranger becomes familiar through repetition, that's when you pause and assess. Not everyone near you wants to see you thrive. Not every gaze carries goodwill. So next time someone coincidentally appears in the same place at the same time, resist the urge to explain it away. Observe, remember, and most importantly, don't ignore that quiescent unease within you. Silence, in many contexts, is a mark of serenity, strength, and self-mastery. But in certain situations, especially those involving unclear relationships or unknown motives, silence becomes a weapon, a deliberate mask to conceal intent and blur your perception of danger. A person may choose silence not because they are indifferent, but because they wish to remain unnoticed. By withholding comments, avoiding direct involvement, and concealing emotion, they become unreadable. No one knows where they stand, what they think, or what they want. While most of us form judgments through words, expressions, and reactions, those who remain silent slip past this process of assessment with ease. The silent observer doesn't need to enter your life through clear words or overt action. They need only to be present at the right place at the right time, yet unnoticed. It's their lack of response, their passivity, that makes others feel safe around them. They are not rude, not imposing, not invasive, but they are there. They witness, they remember, and they do it with intent. Unlike those who display hostility outright, silent individuals offer no signal of interest, no clue that they are evaluating you. They let you speak freely, act openly, trust easily, but never give you the same in return. They are a flat mirror, reflecting everything while revealing nothing. This imbalance in the flow of information is what lulls many into a false sense of ease. When you share, reveal, or seek empathy from someone who barely reacts, you assume you are in control. In truth, you are entering a one-sided exchange where all the data flows from you. The other party gains silent power through knowing you better than you know them. That silence often wears the disguise of respecting boundaries, being private, or keeping a healthy distance. These seemingly positive traits put others at ease. But when silence is paired with calculated presence, behavioral tracking, or awareness of your schedule, it is no longer caution. It is strategy in disguise. Socially, we tend to trust those who are clear, predictable, and consistent. When someone leaves no trace of thought or intention, the mind fills that void with positive assumptions. They were probably just reserved. Maybe they don't care, or I'm probably overthinking. But when someone is silent, present, and observant without interaction, that silence becomes a shadow. Some use silence as a tool for emotional manipulation. Without a word, they make others feel watched, judged, yet unable to pinpoint by whom. It's one of the subtlest tactics of control, built on ambiguity. With no hard evidence to confront, the target often doubts themselves, convincing their own mind that they are merely being too sensitive. In more serious situations, silence is used to forge false trust. A person who never criticizes, never argues, never pressures, can easily be mistaken for someone safe. But if there is no authentic sign that they understand, support, or share your values, then that silence cannot be the foundation of a healthy relationship. On the contrary, it is the smoothest, most elusive mask, and the easiest to overlook. In the context of Stoic philosophy, self-mastery and inner peace do not mean ignoring reality. To clearly perceive the nature of a behavior, even one that makes no noise and leaves no trace, is a sign of wisdom and preparedness. Silence, when used as a tool of calculated observation, becomes a soundless warning. And when no sound is made, only awareness allows us to hear what must be heard. 2. The seed sower of doubt, corruption at the root. In the modern social world, not every attack arrives through blatant acts or open confrontation. One of the most insidious and destructive forms comes through vague comments, quiet whispers that spread with unsettling ease. Unlike direct criticism, which can be challenged or addressed, insinuation drifts past like wind, leaving no clear trace, yet quietly corroding reputations and relationships. What defines this kind of communication is its lack of precision. Instead of saying, "He's not trustworthy," the speaker simply asks, "Has he seemed different lately?" Or, "I'm not sure what's going on, but something feels off." These words often come with a suspicious glance, a calculated pause, or a tone suggesting withheld secrets. And yet, it is precisely this vagueness that makes them potent, hinting at something negative without ever offering real proof. When a listener hears such words, they don't immediately judge. Instead, they begin to observe, to speculate, to search for evidence to validate what they've heard, even when they had no reason to doubt before. The human mind tends to fill gaps with assumption, especially when it concerns someone familiar. And once suspicion begins to take root, it tends to grow and reinforce itself over time. The true danger of vague speech lies in the speaker's ability to deny responsibility. If confronted, they can easily say they never said anything wrong. "It was just a feeling," or "I didn't make any claims, only an impression." These defenses protect the speaker from blame, while the target bears the burden, facing fractured relationships, eroding trust, and a distorted image in the eyes of others. This kind of speech is especially common in collective settings, where information travels fast and accountability is richer. A vague remark, passed from person to person, becomes even more obscure, yet more powerful, because it carries the implied credibility of multiple previous listeners. All while the victim remains unaware, a negative perception forms in the group's collective mind. Hard to erase, harder to repair. Stoic philosophy does not place emphasis on managing reputation, since reputation lies outside our control. However, awareness of actions that poison our environment is essential. For when someone is unaware that they are being targeted by a campaign of doubt, they are likely to react emotionally, with anger, confusion, attempts at defense, and in doing so, may unintentionally validate the very suspicion being spread. More dangerously, vague words can trigger a social domino effect. Once someone begins to question, they naturally seek confirmation from others. "Did you notice that too? Don't you think she's been a bit off lately?" In this way, suspicion spreads without evidence, relying only on feeling, which is easily steered by group psychology. Thus, an invisible cut can fracture an entire web of relationships without a single direct accusation. This form of subtle sabotage affects not just the individual, but the entire environment around them: workplace, circle of friends, family, community. When someone is isolated through quiet doubt, they lose not only their social bonds, but also their confidence, clarity of action, even their sense of direction. And it all begins with a single, seemingly harmless phrase, carrying hidden intent. That is why, in any social space, recognizing patterns of vague, destabilizing communication is the first step toward protecting a healthy environment. Not through confrontation, but through careful observation, discernment of motives, and firm boundaries of trust. A word, light as air, can shift the course of a ship. If repeated often enough, and no one ever sees the moment the rudder began to drift. In every form of human connection, family, work, or community, people seek relationship. These ties provide safety, emotional support, and resilience in hardship. Yet one of the most dangerous strategies of sabotage does not strike the person directly, but targets the network around them. Instead of attacking head-on, the saboteur divides to isolate, quietly severing each link, leaving the victim alone and wondering how it happened. This tactic often begins with isolated approaches. A mutual friend is engaged with a negative remark about you, not overt, not conclusive, but just enough to plant doubt. For instance, have you felt she's been distant lately? Or, he doesn't seem quite the same anymore. These statements are typically framed with concern, worry, or private confession to create a sense of sincerity. The goal is not to turn someone against you instantly, but to weaken trust little by little until closeness is replaced by caution and detachment. Once a person in the group starts to doubt, they tend to seek validation from others. They ask around, repeat what they've heard, and trigger a chain reaction. And so, trust begins to erode, not through any clear fault of the target, but through fragments of incomplete information, repeated across many voices. What makes this especially dangerous is how the saboteur hides behind a neutral facility. They don't openly instigate conflict. On the contrary, they appear as a connector, a peacemaker, even someone of goodwill. Yet while they seem to be nurturing harmony, they are in fact pulling the links apart. They tell different versions to different people, spreading selective information that fuels misunderstanding, while making it impossible to trace the source. This is manipulation by information, not through lies, but through guided ambiguity. As the social fabric begins to tear, the target rarely notices at first. They simply sense that interactions grow colder, no longer feel natural. Former allies become cautious. Conversations dwindle. Tension builds without clear cause. In some cases, the isolated person may react defensively or with anger, which only reinforces the negative image the saboteur has already been quietly constructing. Social isolation is not merely the loss of relationships, it leads to a diminished sense of self-worth. Without anyone left to offer honest feedback, the isolated individual begins to doubt themselves, loses direction, and becomes increasingly vulnerable. This is the ultimate aim of the divide to isolate strategy, to strip the target of support, leave them exposed, and push them into a state of passive disempowerment. In many organizations, teams, or even families, this kind of sabotage often goes unnoticed because it does not provoke direct conflict. Everything unfolds in silence, cloaked in concern, sharing, or care for the group. By the time the truth surfaces, if it ever does, it's too late. The victim has lost their core relationships, and trust has long since been replaced by enduring suspicion. It's important to recognize that the strategy of a divide and isolate does not require brilliance or advanced manipulation. Just a little patience, a few intentional words, and a basic grasp of group psychology are enough to cause serious harm. Meanwhile, the affected individual has little chance to resist, because they don't even know they've been placed at the center of a quiet campaign of division. In such situations, the ability to recognize signs of covert isolation and understand the intent behind seemingly harmless remarks becomes more crucial than ever. Observing shifts in others' attitudes, changes in interaction patterns, a drop in openness, or the appearance of unexplained misunderstandings. These are vital indicators that you may be the target of a non-confrontational, yet deeply effective form of sabotage. 3. The friendly mask, not truly a friend. In ordinary relationships, intimacy and trust are meant to develop gradually over time. This process usually requires repeated interaction, shared challenges to test reliability, and a foundation of mutual values. However, some individuals approach others in a completely different way, closing the distance unnaturally fast, showing deep concern without any real understanding. When this behavior arises without clear intent, it may signal the opening move of a manipulative strategy disguised as kindness. One of the clearest signs of this approach is its speed. After just a few brief conversations, the person acts as if they understand you better than anyone, using phrases like, "I feel like we really click," "You made me trust you from the start," or "It's rare for me to open up this quickly." These words create the illusion of a special connection, but in truth, they're not based on shared experience or genuine understanding. They are designed to make you feel valued, so you'll lower your guard quickly. With that rapid approach comes excessive attention. These individuals tend to ask deeply personal questions about your family, your relationships, job pressures, even childhood memories. At first, this may seem like sincere interest, but when it comes too soon, too intensely, especially when they've shared little about themselves, it becomes a clear warning sign. The goal isn't friendship, it's data collection. Every detail you reveal, your fears, past failures, inner conflicts, becomes information they can use later. Beneath the guise of empathy, they are building an emotional map of you, learning your vulnerabilities, your pain points, your predictable responses under pressure. The sense of closeness they foster is often built on controlled reciprocal sharing. They tell you a personal story, one that seems deep but is carefully chosen, harmless if exposed, yet enough to stir empathy and convince you that they're opening up too. As a result, you feel compelled to share more, to trust more. And that's when the information balance begins to tip. In workplaces, social networks, or small communities, these people rarely attract suspicion. They appear likable, attentive, emotionally intelligent, but their close relationships often develop rapidly, then fade without a trace. This tends to happen once the target senses something is off, or once the manipulator has extracted what they came for. One reason this behavior is hard to detect is the absence of conflict. These individuals apply no pressure, make no demands, and ask for nothing explicit. Everything feels natural, yet unkeys at a pace that outstrips the normal rhythm of trust. That's why many, looking back, realize they revealed far too much, far too early, to someone they barely knew at all. Psychologically, this strategy of fast bonding and excessive interest is often used by those seeking early psychological leverage. They make you feel understood while creating emotional dependency, so that if the relationship evolves to their advantage, they can guide it at will. This sudden intimacy blurs personal boundaries, making it difficult for the target to assess the situation objectively. From a practical standpoint, recognizing this pattern doesn't require extreme suspicion, but rather presence of mind and bound observation. If someone new seems to know too much, care too deeply, and urges you to open up too quickly, that's the moment to pause and ask, does this pace make sense for how well we actually know each other? Because in many cases, the deepest wounds come not from strangers, but from a friend who came too fast and left too much behind. In most cultures, kindness, courtesy, and friendliness are regarded as gold standards of social behavior. People tend to trust warm smiles, soft voices, and polite manners. Yet it is this very expectation that creates space for deliberately disguised intentions. When a person uses kindness as a tool, not as a reflection of inner sincerity, that friendliness is no longer goodwill. It becomes a psychological weapon, cloaked in charm. The one who wears a friendly mask rarely displays overt hostility. They maintain a model image in public, know how to speak at the right moment with the right tone, and are often the first to offer help when someone is in need. Yet their friendliness is not accompanied by transparency. You may know much about what they do for others, but very little, or almost nothing, about their real thoughts, emotions, or values. They behave like a good friend, yet leave no trace of true connection. In conversation, they always offer agreeable feedback, show empathy, and seem understanding, but rarely venture into any topic that requires real vulnerability or emotional investment. They keep the relationship at a safe distance, close enough to earn your trust, but never close enough to be hurt should something go wrong. One telltale trait of such people is their oddly stable behavior. They never get angry, never express strong opinions, never oppose anything openly. At first, this calmness feels pleasant, but over time, it leaves you uncertain, uneasy. When conflict or crisis arises, they retreat, go transit, or deflect. Not out of indifference, but to preserve their image as someone uninvolved and unaccountable. This friendliness becomes a weapon when they use that image to influence others, without rank on suspicion. They may talk about you to others under the guise of gentle concern, well-meaning advice, or private worry. Yet in truth, the information is carefully framed to shape how others perceive you. When you sense something is wrong and begin to respond with caution, they maintain their kindness, making your reaction seem too sensitive, overly harsh, or socially unaware. Because they've never directly caused harm, you and others around you find it difficult to point to any specific wrongdoing. They leave no traceable offense, speak nothing overtly incriminating, and never act openly. This not only makes them easily forgiven, but often defended by those who can't see past the polished exterior. In professional settings, those who wear the friendly mask often rise quickly into influential roles as they skillfully manage their image. maintain surface-level relationships, and avoid confrontation. However, their presence can become a source of quiet instability for those who are genuinely sincere as they construct a web of interaction built not on authenticity, but on control. When conflicts arise, they appear as bystanders, letting others take the fall while preserving their favorable reputation. What makes this type especially dangerous is the subtle and prolonged nature of their influence. Because everything seems normal, cordial, the target often takes a long time to realize they're being emotionally manipulated. In that span, they may have revealed sensitive information, shared private thoughts, or allowed the other to shape important decisions without ever recognizing that they were being quietly steered. Through the lens of Stoic philosophy, awareness is not only the ability to perceive internal emotions, but also the capacity to observe the world with rational clarity. When encountering those who seem too perfect, too agreeable, yet lack depth and openness, what's needed is not suspicion, but space. Space to observe so that judgment is not clouded by appearances. For sometimes the threat does not arrive with noise, but with a prolonged softness that leaves no trace. 4. Silent escalation, testing the boundaries. In social behavior, not all aggression begins with open conflict. Some choose to escalate hostility quietly and gradually, bit by bit, testing others' tolerance without exposing themselves as the source of harm. This is one of the most common strategies in the manipulative relationships, as it avoids creating a clear moment of confrontation and instead wears down the other's resistance through a series of minor acts. Silent escalation often begins with experimental behavior, a seemingly harmless joke that crosses a line, a comment about appearance, past experiences, or private circumstances. If the target reacts weakly or brushes it off to avoid drama, the behavior escalates. When a boundary goes undefended, the aggressor learns they can proceed without consequence. What makes this tactic effective is its disguise. Inappropriate words or actions are cloaked in phrases like, "just kidding," "don't take it so seriously," or "everyone was laughing." The mix of aggression and social acceptability makes it awkward for the target to push back. They fear being seen as overly sensitive, humorless, or so socially out of step. Over time, this psychology silences them as the behaviors grow more intrusive. Beyond words, boundary testing also appears in physical contact or spatial encroachment. Standing too close, accidental touching, or making one feel watched are all ways to gauge reaction. If there's no clear objection, the aggressor feels they've been given a green light to push further. This strategy is often employed by those seeking power and control without exposure. They don't cause dramatic incidents or provoke clear confrontations, but each calculated act pushes the target into discomfort. Over time, the person being targeted begins to lose their sense of safety in interactions, becomes hyper-aware of every action, and slips into self-censorship. That self-censorship is the deeper goal of this silent escalation. When a person starts adjusting their behavior to avoid being mocked, noticed, or causing discomfort, they are quietly surrendering their personal boundaries. The aggressor notices this and uses it to intensify the game. Now, not just with jokes, but with targeted emotional manipulation, unreasonable demands, public shaming, or pressure in private settings. Part of this strategy involves crafting a social setting that benefits the manipulator. They choose to act in the presence of others, bystanders unaware of the full story, to frame their behavior as harmless. To outsiders, it looks like a joke, a friendly gesture. But to the target, it's the next step in an escalating sequence already spiraling out of control. The presence of a third party serves another purpose: to provoke shame if the target reacts. When someone feels judged by an audience, they tend to tone down their response or delay action to preserve their image. That's when the manipulator expands the scope of their behavior, emboldened by the lack of real resistance. Silent escalation may not lead to immediate violence or visible harm, but it creates a toxically prolonged dynamic. The target often falls into a state of chronic anxiety, an unsettled sense of violated boundaries, and confusion about the relationship. They are unsure what's happening, uncertain whether their feelings are valid, and most of all, unsure how to end the pattern safely. In some cases, when the target finally responds forcefully, usually after prolonged endurance, the aggressor flips the narrative. "I was just joking and they overreacted," or "I didn't know that would affect you so much." These statements make the injured party seem irrational, while the original behavior remains unmet. This is how silent escalation shields itself from accountability. Additionally, it is important to note that manipulators who use this tactic often observe carefully before they act. They target only those they believe they can control, those who avoid confrontation, prioritize harmony, or lack strong social support. Before the escalation begins, there is usually a brief phase of testing. Through probing questions, small acts, or watching how the target interacts with others. When the surrounding environment fails to detect or respond to the escalation, it silently legitimizes the tactic. Bystanders see nothing outrageous and remain quiet. This silence enables the aggressor to continue, while leaving the victim feeling isolated, unseen, unheard, and disbelieved. This is the stage most likely to result in serious psychological consequences such as chronic stress, eroded self-confidence, or withdrawal from social relationships. Recognizing silent escalation requires awareness, not only at the individual level, but also within the group structure and environment of interaction. Organizations, communities, or social circles must pay attention to subtle shifts in behavior among members, such as someone suddenly becoming quieter, avoiding engagement, or reacting passively when teased. These may be early signs that their personal boundaries are being systematically violated. In conclusion, silent escalation is one of the most complex and dangerous forms of manipulation because it has no clear starting point, no concrete evidence, and no dramatic incident. Everything unfolds in small steps, day by day, until the victim realizes they have lost control of themselves in what once seemed like a harmless environment. For this reason, vigilance and understanding of covert aggression are essential to maintaining personal boundaries, protecting inner autonomy, and fostering a healthy environment of interaction. 5. The patient predator. The darkness is never in a hurry. Among the hidden forms of manipulation and threat, there is one type especially dangerous: the patient predator. They are never in a rush, never impulsive, and never reveal their intent in the early stages of a relationship. Unlike overt aggressors or whisperers of doubt, The patient predator crafts a long-term plan, quietly gathers information, builds trust, and waits for the right moment to strike. It is this prolonged silence and seemingly harmless demeanor that makes them the most difficult threat to detect. What defines them most clearly is their ability to restrain themselves over long periods. They have no need for immediate influence. They understand that true control requires time and a strategic place in someone's life. Instead of rushing in or displaying excessive friendliness, they maintain just enough interaction to avoid suspicion. Perhaps a few appearances, a brief conversation, or a timely favor. At first, they may not stand out. In a group of friends, they aren't the most outgoing. At work, they are neither exceptional nor troublesome. But they are always watching, observing how others behave, identifying who is vulnerable, who is in crisis, and especially who lacks emotional or social support. Those going through hardship or with easily perceived weaknesses become prime targets. Unlike more typical forms of manipulation, where personal information is extracted early on, the patient predator rarely asks much. They let you speak. By creating a space free of judgment, they encourage you to open up without pressure. The information they gather does not come from direct questioning, but from what you voluntarily reveal in moments of perceived safety. The trust built is not the fruit of their sincerity, but part of a calculated plan of incremental acquisition. Alongside this data gathering is the construction of a trustworthy persona. The patient predator is careful in how they present themselves to others. They never speak ill of anyone. You avoid conflict and maintain a courteous, composed image. They rarely show negative emotion. When someone is disappointed, they are the listener. When someone needs help, they are present. Every action reinforces the image of the good person, significantly reducing suspicion should anything strange occur later. Once trust is established, they begin to involve themselves more deeply in the target's personal life, not through commands or pressure, but via genuine advice, constant concern, or conditional support. They don't coerce, but make you feel like they are the only one who is truly there, the only one who understands and supports you. Over time, this creates emotional dependency, discouraging the target from seeking other opinions and increasing their agreement with the predator's suggestions. The real danger lies in the fact that everything appears reasonable. When the predator offers financial help, suggests a job change, or interferes in close relationships, they always have a plausible justification. I only want what's best for you. But behind the aid is the gradual isolation of the victim from other support sources. Old friends fade away, family ties weaken, and eventually only one person remains, the one now controlling the entire narrative. The patient predator never acts before they are ready. They strike only when the victim has no more ground to stand on, when resistance is weak, and when every action can be masked as reasonable behavior. By then, if they manipulate, coerce, or even harm, the victim will struggle to find help, because those around them still believe this is a good person, a close friend, or someone who truly cares. A distinctive element of this pattern is the use of time as a weapon. They are never in a hurry. They know that a relationship forged over years is far less likely to be questioned. Through patience, they make the victim believe that the bond was formed through genuine empathy and understanding. As a result, when negative behavior emerges, the victim tends to rationalize it, believing it to be a temporary hardship, not their true character. In some cases, the predator's control extends beyond emotions into finances, work, or life decisions. Once the relationship reaches the level of dependency, even saying no to a small request becomes difficult. Refusal brings guilt, fear of loss, or anxiety about being abandoned. This is when the victim is most easily and completely controlled, without a single overt threat. In social environments, the patient predator is rarely exposed unless a serious incident occurs. Most of the time, they exist as a quietly good person in the eyes of the community. They know how to maintain their mask, understand the psychology of the crowd, and avoid open conflict. Even when a few begin to suspect, their long-standing behavioral consistency allows them to deflect doubt. This makes proving their true intent nearly impossible, especially in relationships lacking legal or formal boundaries. It must be emphasized that what makes this type dangerous is not the degree of violence, but their invisibility and the depth of harm they inflict. By the time the victim realizes they've been controlled, that trust in others has eroded, and dependency has taken root. Escape is no longer just a physical act. It becomes an inner battle that may last for years. Returning to ordinary life becomes difficult because trust has been worn away at the foundation. Therefore, recognizing early signs of unusual behavior, even subtle ones, from someone who always seems too timely, too devoted, yet shares little of themselves, is essential. Not to rush to judgment, but to preserve a safe space for observation, to assess the relationship over time, rather than be guided by impulse. In everyday life, we inevitably encounter people with unclear intentions, from colleagues who always coincidentally appear, acquaintances who sow doubt, to overly friendly relationships that lack sincerity. The most important lesson I've learned from Stoicism is this: we cannot control others, but we can always control how we respond. Instead of reacting emotionally, with anger, hurt, or a need to appease just to preserve the relationship, I've learned to observe more and react less. Unusual behavior is no longer dismissed as no big deal, but recognized as a sign worth considering. When someone crosses a boundary in subtle ways, I no longer stay silent just to keep the peace. I reassert my boundaries with calm, not shouting, not attacking, just with clarity and consistency. Stoicism has taught me that vigilance is not fear. It is reason in action. We don't have to be suspicious of everyone, but we also shouldn't hand over our trust too easily. Every relationship requires time to be tested, and if I must choose between being true to my limits or pretending to please someone else, I choose truth, because inner freedom matters more than any external approval. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next one. Because sometimes, survival doesn't depend on physical strength, but on the ability to see who is real and who is not before it's too late. See you in the next video.